Frontmen are supposed to be the face of the band, the voice, the energy, the charisma. But sometimes, that larger-than-life personality is exactly what drags the whole group down. Whether it's ego trips, personal meltdowns, or just straight-up questionable choices, these frontmen didn't just lead their bands, they ruined them. From derailing careers to sparking endless controversy, these 15 rock stars became living proof that sometimes the biggest problem in a band might just be the guy with the microphone. Think your favorite frontman made the cut? Join us as we take a look at 15 frontmen who almost ruined the bands we grew up loving. Number 15. Syd Barrett. Emily, there is no other day. Syd Barrett wasn't just the frontman of Pink Floyd, he was their creative nucleus. The band's early sound was pure Barrett, surreal lyrics, unconventional song structures, and a mesmerizing presence on stage. Songs like See Emily Play and Astronomy Domini made Floyd pioneers of the growing psychedelic scene, but while Barrett's creativity was otherworldly, so were his demons. By 1967, Barrett's excessive use of LSD had taken its toll. He became increasingly erratic, sometimes standing motionless on stage or playing a single chord for an entire set. The band struggled to cope with his unpredictable behavior, and the situation reached a breaking point during the recording of A Saucer Full of Secrets in 1968. Eventually, the rest of the band made the brutal decision to move forward without him, bringing in David Gilmour to fill the gap. Barrett's departure marked a fundamental shift for Pink Floyd. They moved from whimsical psychedelia to sprawling, introspective epics like Echoes and Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a song directly inspired by Barrett's tragic decline. Despite later becoming one of the biggest rock acts in history, fans and band members never forgot how Barrett's genius burned too brightly and then vanished into madness. Number 14. Dennis DeYoung. You know it's you, babe, whenever I get weary. If you were into bombastic rock anthems in the late 70s, Styx was your band. But by the early 80s, things took a bizarre turn, and a lot of that blame lands on Dennis DeYoung. Known for his powerful vocals and keyboard expertise, DeYoung was also the band's primary songwriter, and while his ambitious vision fueled classics like Come Sail Away and Babe, it also took the band in some questionable directions. The tipping point? Kilroy Was Here, 1983, an overly theatrical concept album about a dystopian future where rock music is banned. The album's rock opera aesthetic, complete with cheesy music videos and over-the-top storytelling, alienated longtime fans and drove guitarist Tommy Shaw up the wall. Shaw wanted to stick with rock and roll, but DeYoung was dead set on his grand artistic vision. The tension was palpable, and soon enough, the band fractured. When DeYoung's desire to tour with a more theatrical presentation clashed with Shaw's vision, the band gave him the boot. Styx carried on without him, but their commercial peak was behind them. Fans were left wondering how a band that once pumped out arena rock anthems ended up playing rock operas about robot uprisings. Number 13. Axl Rose. Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games. We got everything you want. When it comes to rock and roll meltdowns, Axl Rose practically wrote the book. As the volatile frontman of Guns N' Roses, he went from being one of rock's most electrifying performers to the poster child for self-sabotage. With Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion, Guns N' Roses was on top of the world, cranking out timeless hits like Sweet Child of Mine and November Rain. But as the band's fame skyrocketed, so did Axl's unpredictable behavior. Late starts, walk-offs, and tantrums became the norm. The band's infamous 1991 Riverport riot started when Axl leapt off the stage to confront a fan with a camera, then abruptly left, sparking chaos. His insistence on complete control only made things worse. As band members like Slash and Duff McKagan grew tired of his antics, GNR's classic lineup crumbled. Then came Chinese Democracy, an album that took over a decade to make and became synonymous with overblown ambition. Fans waited for years as Axl cycled through musicians and burned through cash, only to be met with an album that felt like a shadow of the band's former glory. By the time it finally dropped in 2008, the rock world had moved on. To Axl's credit, he did eventually reconcile with Slash and Duff for a successful reunion tour, but the damage was done. Instead of being remembered purely as rock legends, Guns N' Roses became equally known for Axl's ego-driven implosions. Speaking of frontmen who pushed their bands to the brink. Number 12. Brian Jones. Oh no! Well, I'm sorry, girl, but In the early 1960s, Brian Jones was the heart and soul of the Rolling Stones. He may not have been the frontman, but unbeknownst to most, he was the original leader. As a multi-instrumentalist and the band's founding member, he played everything from guitar to sitar, shaping the band's early blues rock sound. But fame hit him harder than most, and soon his brilliance was overshadowed by drug addiction and erratic behavior. By 1969, Jones was a liability. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger had taken over songwriting duties, and Jones, barely able to function during recording sessions, was pushed out. Just weeks later, his body was found at the bottom of his swimming pool. Officially ruled as death by misadventure, his passing marked the end of an era for the Stones. Though the band soldiered on with guitarist Mick Taylor, fans couldn't ignore how Jones' influence had shaped the band's golden age. The Stones became stadium rock giants, but some felt they lost the raw, experimental edge that Jones brought to the table. Even today, his tragic end serves as a haunting reminder of rock and roll excess and the cost of creative genius spiraling out of control. But while Jones' decline was a tragic warning, our next frontman's downfall was fueled by lawsuits, feuds, and a bitter fight for control. Number 11. John Fogerty. Creedance Clearwater Revival were the kings of swamp rock in the late 60s and early 70s, churning out hit after hit with John Fogerty's gritty vocals and tight guitar work. But as much as Fogerty drove the band's success, he also drove it straight into the ground. Creative control wasn't just important to Fogerty, it was non-negotiable. He wrote, sang, and produced nearly every hit Creedance Clearwater Revival released, which bred resentment among his bandmates, especially his own brother, Tom Fogerty. When Tom quit in 1971, the band pressed on as a trio, but cracks were forming. Then came the real kicker, legal battles. Fogerty's feud with Fantasy Records over royalties and song ownership left him disillusioned and bitter, refusing to perform Creedance songs for years. The band disbanded in 1972, and the fallout became one of rock's ugliest sagas. Even decades later, Fogerty's grudge toward his former bandmates and label remained, overshadowing the band's legacy of timeless classics like Fortunate Son and Bad Moon Rising. Number 10. Vince Neil. If ever there was a frontman whose reckless behavior matched the chaos of his band, it was Vince Neil of Motley Crue. As the voice behind iconic tracks like Kickstart My Heart and Girls, 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 Neil helped catapult Motley Crue to the pinnacle of glam metal excess. But his offstage antics threatened to destroy everything the band had built. Neil's problems started early on, but the most notorious incident came in 1984 when he drove drunk and caused a car crash that killed Hanoi Rocks drummer Nicholas Razzle Dingley. Neil served just 15 days in jail, but the tragedy left a stain on his reputation that never fully faded. While the band continued to dominate the late 80s, Neil's substance abuse and erratic performances grew increasingly problematic. Tensions peaked in 1992 when he was fired, or left, depending on who you ask, leading to an ill-fated attempt to replace him with John Corabi. The resulting album tanked, and the band's popularity nosedived. While Neil eventually returned, his performances were a mixed bag, with critics often slamming his vocals and stage presence. Even as Motley Crue made their comeback rounds, fans couldn't ignore the reality. Neil was a shadow of his former self. Recent performances haven't helped his case either. Out-of-breath singing, forgotten lyrics, and a general lack of energy that only confirmed what everyone was thinking. He was the weak link in an otherwise legendary band. But if you thought Vince Neil's downward spiral was messy, just wait until we get to a frontman whose public persona became more infamous than his music. Number 9. Morrissey.
I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear.
When it comes to frontmen who sabotage their own legacy, Morrissey's got it down to a science. As the mysterious and poetic voice of the Smiths, he helped define indie rock in the 80s with haunting lyrics and a melancholy delivery. Songs like There Is a Light That Never Goes Out and This Charming Man remain classics, but Morrissey's legacy took a dark turn long after the band split. The Smiths' breakup in 1987 was brutal, with bitter legal battles and public spats between Morrissey and guitarist Johnny Marr. While Marr moved on with a solid solo career, Morrissey dove deeper into his own controversies. From questionable political statements to openly alienating his fanbase, he became increasingly toxic. The final nail in the coffin for many fans came as Morrissey's statements grew increasingly inflammatory and divisive. Concert cancellations, walk-offs, and rants about everything from politics to veganism turned his shows into more of a spectacle than a performance. For a guy who once captivated audiences with his lyrical vulnerability, he now feels more like a provocateur desperately clinging to relevance. It's gotten to the point where even longtime Smith's devotees are torn between loving the music and disowning the man behind it. Instead of being remembered as an indie icon, Morrissey's become one of rock's most controversial figures, a masterclass on how to ruin your own legacy. And if Morrissey's self-sabotage wasn't enough, how about a frontman whose theatrical antics split both the band and the fan base? Number 8. David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth didn't just front Van Halen, he was Van Halen. With his wild charisma, acrobatic stage moves, and that unmistakable high-pitched wail, Roth made hits like Jump and Panama instant classics. But his larger-than-life persona wasn't just on stage. Behind the scenes, his ego clashed relentlessly with Eddie Van Halen's perfectionism. By the mid-80s, tensions boiled over, leading to Roth's exit from the band in 1985. Sammy Hagar stepped in and took Van Halen in a more mainstream direction, scoring hits like Why Can't This Be Love and Right Now. While the band found continued success, fans were divided. Team Roth versus Team Hagar became a genuine cultural debate. Roth's solo career had some flashes of brilliance, but nothing could match the peak Van Halen years. He'd occasionally rejoin the band, but every reunion seemed to go south as quickly as it began. Meanwhile, Roth's onstage persona became a bit of a caricature, more talk than talent, more antics than energy. When the band officially called it quits after Eddie Van Halen's death, many fans couldn't help but wonder how much more they could have achieved if Roth had just toned down his ego. Instead, his legacy became intertwined with missed opportunities and a sense of what could have been. Number 7. Steven Tyler. Steven Tyler is undeniably one of rock's most iconic voices, belting out classics like Dream On and Walk This Way with that signature raspy wail. Aerosmith became the epitome of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and Tyler was the flamboyant, scarf-wrapped ringleader at the heart of it all. But his wild lifestyle didn't just shape his persona, it almost destroyed the band. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Tyler's addiction issues became notorious, earning him and guitarist Joe Perry the nickname the Toxic Twins. As Tyler's substance abuse spiraled out of control, so did Aerosmith's stability. Internal feuds and inconsistent performances led to Perry leaving the band in 1979. With their core lineup fractured, Aerosmith's popularity declined massively. Even after the band's triumphant comeback in the late 80s and early 90s, thanks to hits like Lovin' an Elevator and Janie's Got a Gun, Tyler's erratic behavior didn't stop. In the 2000s, tensions resurfaced as Tyler pursued solo projects without telling the band and checked into rehab again. At one point, Aerosmith even auditioned potential replacements while Tyler was out of commission. Despite all the drama, Aerosmith remains one of America's most enduring rock acts, but Tyler's turbulent leadership left scars that never fully healed, reminding fans that sometimes being a rock god comes with a steep price. Number 6. Peter Green.
But don't ask me what I think of you, I might not give the answer that you want me to.
Before Fleetwood Mac became known for their pop rock hits and California love triangles, they were a gritty British blues band led by guitar virtuoso Peter Green. Green's soulful playing and haunting vocals defined early classics like Black Magic Woman and Oh Well. The guy could shred and sing with an authenticity that made blues purists take notice. But like so many rock legends, Green's genius came at a heavy price. By 1970, his experimentation with LSD had triggered a mental breakdown, and his behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started giving away money and possessions, feeling guilty about the band's success and wealth. In a bizarre twist, he even approached his bandmates with plans to give away their earnings to charity. Eventually, the pressures of fame and his deteriorating mental state forced Green to leave the band altogether. Without him, Fleetwood Mac drifted in musical limbo, cycling through guitarists and styles until they struck gold with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks in the mid-70s. While the band ultimately reinvented themselves, Green's departure left a gaping hole, and for many fans, the transition from gritty blues to polished pop felt like the soul of the band had been lost. Number 5. Dave Mustaine.
Like a robot.
Dave Mustaine is the ultimate redemption story turned warning. Kicked out of Metallica in 1983 for his erratic behavior and substance abuse, he channeled his rage into forming Megadeth, a band that would become one of thrash metal's big four. Tracks like Symphony of Destruction and Holy Wars: The Punishment Due were all the proof needed to solidify Mustaine's legacy as a guitar god. But his abrasive personality and relentless grudges made him just as infamous as his music. Mustaine's well-documented beef with Metallica never really faded. Decades after his departure, he still couldn't resist taking shots at his former bandmates in interviews, feeding a narrative that he was perpetually bitter. While his ambition kept Megadeth competitive, his leadership style was less than inspiring. Constant lineup changes, fueled by Mustaine's demanding perfectionism and ego, made the band feel more like a solo project than a cohesive unit. And then there's his political and social commentary. Never one to hold back, Mustaine's outspoken opinions often left fans cringing. His divisive statements alienated parts of his fanbase, overshadowing his undeniable talent. Even his 2002 public declaration of becoming a born-again Christian didn't soften his abrasive public persona. Despite everything, Mustaine's drive kept Megadeth relevant for decades, but his stubbornness and lack of self-awareness made it impossible for him to shake the reputation of being thrash metal's most volatile frontman. When it comes to legendary bands transformed by a frontman's departure, our next entry is the perfect description of what happens when a volatile genius tears apart one of rock's most influential acts. Number 4. Lou Reed.
I wait for my man.
The Velvet Underground weren't just a band, they were a revolution. Their raw, gritty sound and unapologetic lyrics about addiction, sexuality, and life on society's fringes made them somewhat of social heroes. And at the center of it all was Lou Reed, moody, enigmatic, and fiercely uncompromising. Songs like Heroin and I'm Waiting for the Man were his brutally honest reflections on New York's dark underbelly. But Reed wasn't exactly a team player. As the band's primary songwriter and creative force, he often butted heads with other members, especially multi-instrumentalist John Cale. Tensions boiled over during the recording of their third album, and Reed made a power move, forcing Cale out. With Cale gone, the band's experimental edge faded, and their music took a more subdued melodic turn. By 1970, Reed himself was done. Burned out and frustrated, he walked away from the band entirely, leaving them to release one last album without him before folding altogether. While Reed's solo career soared with songs like Walk on the Wild Side, the Velvet Underground's legacy remained trapped in the shadows, unappreciated in their time, but later hailed as one of the most influential rock bands ever. Number 3. Michael Stipe.
Set it up. That's me in the corner.
R.E.M. was one of the most influential alternative rock bands of the 80s and 90s, and frontman Michael Stipe played a huge role in shaping that legacy. Songs like Losing My Religion and Everybody Hurts became anthems for a generation, thanks to Stipe's introspective lyrics and haunting vocals. But as the band's sound evolved, so did Stipe's artistic vision, sometimes at the expense of accessibility. After achieving mainstream success, R.E.M. leaned into experimental territory with albums like Monster and Up. While some fans appreciated the band's willingness to evolve, others felt alienated by the increasingly abstract lyrics and unconventional sounds. Stipe's obsession with maintaining artistic integrity often meant pushing away mainstream appeal, and the band's popularity began to wane. By the time R.E.M. called it quits in 2011, Stipe's legacy as a frontman was complicated. While undeniably talented and influential, his unwavering commitment to experimentation sometimes left even loyal fans feeling disconnected. Instead of riding the wave of their peak success, R.E.M. gradually faded into the background, leaving listeners wondering what could have been if Stipe had balanced innovation with consistency. Number 2. Geddy Lee. Geddy Lee is an undeniable virtuoso, an absolute beast on bass with a voice that can shatter glass. As the frontman of Rush, he helped turn the Canadian trio into progressive rock legends, cranking out epics like Tom Sawyer and Closer to the Heart. Lee's distinctive high-pitched vocals and intricate bass lines are either pure genius or downright grating. There's no in between. Rush's intricate prog-heavy style already made them an acquired taste, but Lee's vocals became the ultimate love it or hate it factor. Even among rock fans, his singing sparked debates, with some praising his range and others lamenting its nasal, piercing quality. As the band evolved, Lee's insistence on maintaining that signature vocal style left some listeners fatigued. While Lee's talent as a bassist and songwriter was virtually undisputed, his polarizing vocal delivery became a sticking point for casual fans and even some diehard prog rock enthusiasts. Despite Rush's incredible musicianship and tight performances, Lee's voice remained a divisive force that either drew fans in or pushed them away entirely. But if Geddy Lee's polarizing vocals made fans love or hate Rush, this next frontman's transformation from rocker to pop icon left fans feeling downright betrayed. Number 1. Jon Bon Jovi. Jon Bon Jovi was once the world's rock heartthrob, leading his band to arena-sized success with hits like Livin' on a Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name. In the 80s and early 90s, Bon Jovi was untouchable, a perfect blend of glam metal swagger and working-class charm. But as the band moved into the 2000s, something changed. Bon Jovi traded in his rock roots for a more polished, pop country style, leaving diehard fans scratching their heads. Albums like Lost Highway and Have a Nice Day saw the band leaning heavily into mainstream pop rock territory, ditching the raw energy that made them famous. Sure, the records sold well, but some fans felt abandoned as Bon Jovi chased broader appeal. His insistence on keeping the band's name despite the obvious shift in style didn't help. It felt like the Bon Jovi of old was gone, replaced by a watered-down, family-friendly version of his former self. To make matters worse, internal tensions escalated when Richie Sambora, Bon Jovi's iconic guitarist and essential creative partner, left the band in 2013. Fans couldn't help but wonder if Bon Jovi's relentless pursuit of commercial success had driven out one of its core members. While Jon Bon Jovi remains a celebrated figure in rock history, his transformation from rock rebel to pop crooner left many feeling like they lost the band they once loved. And that wraps up our review of frontmen who, whether through chaos, controversy, or creative shifts, left their bands worse off than when they started. Do you agree with our picks, or did we leave out a frontman you think deserves a spot on the list? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more top 15s, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching.